Good evening, everyone. Yehuda Shamroth here of the Miriam Project Geula Hour, bringing you my weekly favorite speaker of the whole entire universe is Rabbi Pinchas Winston, and I'm broadcasting from Jerusalem on a beautiful, windy but spectacular evening in the Holy Land. I am on a balcony in Talpiot, and you can see the background here. It's so beautiful. In the holiest place in the world. Tonight, Rabbi Winston is going to continue. He continues a topic that's of sorts by just helping us prepare for the Geula with his brilliant teachings and his Torah that he has learned through the years through Kabbalah and regular, of course, rooted sources in Torah. And look at his website, please, 36.org. I noticed he's got another website down there too. Waiting for redemption. Of course, we all are. Thank God. And hopefully come soon. And also check out what Josh Wander's website, which is bringthemhome.org, or Israel Torah. All of us here are trying to encourage those people in America and other places outside of Israel to make Aliyah. And so we try to make it easier for you. We have great resources on that website. So please check out the Rabbi's website. Pass this on to your friends, this link. Try to like us on the YouTube channel so we can do more. And please post any questions at all for us tonight or another time in the future for topics you'd like to hear. And one more thing is we want to make sure that if we see any questions, we'll try to answer them. But the Rabbi will try to give one more shiur at least before Yom Kippur. Thank you so much again for always graciously joining us, Rabbi Winston.
Thank you. I imagine that the problem also exists in quantum physics, quantum mechanics. It's amazing what they have come up with, what they think they understand. They're trying to understand. Most of it's all theoretical, but for theory, it's absolutely amazing. But you can just imagine sitting in one of these classes and all these equations on the board and all this discussion, and just think to yourself, what difference does this really make in the end? And the professor will say, well, the truth is this makes all the difference in the world because we're sitting in the reality that all these equations make. And though we have been doing this for thousands of years at least, and no one paid attention to it in the beginning, and it didn't make a huge amount of difference, the truth is that their lack of understanding of how the universe worked limited their ability to use it, to maximize their own potential, to take advantage of what the world has to offer. The reason we get so much more out of life, at least physically, spiritually might be a different story, but physically is because as we advance our understanding of how the world works, we're able to take more advantage of the opportunities and adapt things to our needs and our wants to get more out of life. That's how technology has been advancing for the years. So yeah, it makes a difference to know all these equations. There's some scientist out there who bridges the gap between the world of science, theoretical science, and technology, which is extremely practical, who takes this information and then makes some kind of product that we can all benefit from. So it makes a difference to know all these equations. But when you're sitting there and you're watching these videos about how the universe is, put together, quantum field theory, quantum mechanics, all these different things that they have to try to explain, on a subatomic level, what the makeup of creation, the fabric of reality is from a physical point of view. And that information becomes extremely important if a person wants to understand even really truly this miracle of life. Because when you look at it's one thing if you're confined to the physical world to make things. You're in the physical world, you're part of the physical world, and you have no choice but to use the physical world to build something. You want to build a house, you have to use materials that are available from the physical world. You want to build a car, you have to use materials available from the physical world. But if you're God, you can do anything you want, any way you want to do it. Just by imagining it, it's amazing the physical processes that Hashem created to create this world. And it just reminds you of the Rambam, who tells you that the best way to learn how to love God is just to appreciate what he's done. And look at the wisdom behind all of it. And it's just so incredibly intricate. And the more you look at it, the more you understand, the more you're fascinated. Especially if you know Kabbalah, because or are aware of Kabbalah, because it's very much the same type of a thing, and that is that you're reading about in the Idra Rabbi Zuta, Sifrei Snusa, any Sforim that are the main parts of the Zohar that go into the details of how Hashem got to the point of making physical creation. I mean, the world of physics is basically dealing with the world after Maaseh Bereshis. Kabbalah deals with the world up until Maaseh Bereshis, all in the spiritual plane. And you have ideas about, the Shiva Tikkun Gilgalta, the 7 rectifications of the skull. I'm not talking about a human skull, a physical skull. We're talking about a spiritual skull, the very top of the system. And you have, of course, the Yud Gimel Tikkun Dikna, the 13 rectifications of the beard, of Arach Ampin, right? And how that is the basis of the 13 principles of faith and the 13 principles of mercy and all that. And it's like you can open the Sfarim and you learn it and you read the details and the explanations and all that, and you don't really touch on reality that much. You don't really get to see how that goes down because it's not dealing with the topic. The same way that, for example, that the physics teacher is only interested in teaching quantum field theory. He's not going to get into, by the way, this is how to make a better car. This is how you make a stronger tire. That may be true, but it's not his. That's somebody else, right? That's down the hall in technology 202. And the same thing is true is that the Idra Rabbi Jezut, all these couple of 6 Farim, they don't really go into how this plays out in everyday human life. You can do it, by the way, and there are some places where commentators make a point of doing that and saying that and explaining it. But every once in a while, it does kind of spill over. It does make a difference to the discussion because of the fact that it affects history. You can see it playing out in history. So one of those places, for example, which we're going to read about and daven about in the Musaf of Yom Kippur. We mentioned, of course, on Tisha B'Av too, but the Musaf of Yom Kippur is where it comes up. And scholars that they remember based upon the Medrash, the 10 martyrs that died. There's been millions of Jewish martyrs. And the Gemara itself in Sanhedrin, or actually Gittin and Sanhedrin, talk about the time of the Romans and how much Jewish blood was spilled and how many martyrs there were. But these are unique. The Asar Harugi Malchus, the ones that were killed by the Roman government, Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Chanan Mitrajian, and all the others, right? That's mentioned there, and they're special in as much as not only do we know about them, but the way they died. They died al Kiddush Hashem. They willingly, knowingly, lovingly, as the story is portrayed in the Musaf itself, where it speaks about how this Roman Caesar comes along and says to these Gedolei Adar and says, there's been, what's the punishment if you kidnap your Jewish brother? And they all answer, Misa. Chayiv Misa versus Chayiv Misa. They have to be killed. The Beis Din will kill a person for doing things like that. You can't kidnap. It's not just a financial, it's a life and death type, situation, and the punishment is Misa. And so what happens? So the Caesar says, your ancestors, the 10 Shvatim, 10 sons of Yaakov Avinu, they kidnapped Yosef and then sold them into slavery. Makes it even worse, right? When you sell, that's the completion of the kidnapping. You sell the person, and they were Chayiv Misa, but they never suffered. They weren't killed by any Beis Din. True, okay. But first of all, there was no need for Beis Din back at that time because there was no Torah yet. The Jewish, they were, even if you go to the Ramban, who says that the Avos, they lived according to the mitzvahs of the Torah even before they got them in Eretz Canaan, right? They died in Mitzrayim. Okay, so it took place in Canaan, or did it, and then they went down to Mitzrayim, but they weren't chayiv in mitzvahs yet. They didn't have an obligation. It wasn't the right thing to do, but it's not one of the seven mitzvahs they know that they're chayiv in. The seven nochid laws, they don't not chayiv a death penalty for kidnapping somebody. That came along much later at Mount Sinai. So really, technically speaking, there's no way to pin it on anybody except even them. So there's no need to take retribution later on in history, but the Caesar, for some reason, and Caesars normally don't require any type of reason to kill Jews, big or small. They just do it. They just do it. Their army does it. The generals do it, right? And this Caesar is playing a game, and he says, well, they didn't pay the price. And there's been no one like them until today, except for you 10 rabbis. And Kabbalah explains how, how the 12 Shvatim were actually these 10 rabbis, and how they were Gilgulim reincarnation, so it wasn't out of nowhere this was taking place. This was part of the tikkun of the Shvatim who did so Yos back at that time. The Caesar doesn't know, he's just a means and the instrument to carry it out. But he says, so I'm going to kill you instead for this. We didn't do anything. We have nothing to do with it. What do you want from us? Right? But nonetheless, that's what he says. And they said, well, can we have like a couple of days to consult with heaven on this one? And the Caesar is already weird, but he should say, no, I'm telling you, this is what I'm going to do. And I don't care what heaven has to say about anything. He doesn't do that. Go ahead. Take your 3 days to consult. Rabbi Yishmael prepares himself. He says the name of Hashem. He ascends into Shemayim, and he talks to Gabriel. He says to Gabriel, "What's pshat? What's going on over here? What do you want from us? Are we supposed to die? Not supposed to die? Is this like a test? So Gabriel says, no, not only do you need to die, but you have to die al kiddush Hashem. You have to die, the highest, most glorious way to die on behalf of Hashem, because creation needs this. Your deaths are necessary to keep the world alive." That's what it says. Because we'll see why in a second. And somehow by them dying al kiddush Hashem, that's why you see when they die al kiddush Hashem, they really they go the full distance. They don't just not complain, but they really make a point of sanctifying God's name on their way out to their last breath. And the Rizal says, and the Leshem echoes this, that it was their Mesiras Nefesh, their deaths, that gave creation the ability to survive until the end of days. Now, the other question is, we have the Holocaust also, but to see how that fits into the picture. But they saved creation. And if they hadn't done this, the world would have basically gone down to a level where it would have returned back to null and void, because there was no purpose anymore. Now, what's really going? What's the quantum mechanics, so to speak? What's the physics? The Havdil behind all of this. Why? What difference does it make? So, if you're religious, you've probably heard the concept before of elevating sparks. We have certainly talked about the idea of elevating sparks all the time. We talked about how Mashiach's arrival depends upon the last spark being elevated, because since creation, especially since the Chet of Adam Rishon, the eating from the dust of a ras, so there you have a bunch of holy sparks, and those sparks are in the realm of spiritual impurity, which feeds them and makes them stronger, because they also have to live as well. They exist, to repeat myself, but they exist for the sake of evil, so that we can have free will. End of story. No matter how sophisticated, both in the spiritual world and the physical world, you can look at all the details. It's remarkably detailed in the spiritual world. It's remarkably detailed in the physical world. But if you ask the question, why do all of this? What's the point of all of this? The answer is very simple: because God wanted man to exist and have free will, and this is the way it works. End of story. Then you can go all kinds of details, explanations, but that's the point. Just that we can have free will. Now, we have a purpose, and the purpose is to use that free will in order to choose to help God complete his ultimate purpose for creation, which is coming up not much later on. We'll start reaching those levels a little bit in the Messianic era, then more into Chis and Mesim, and of course more and more in the world to come. Eventually get to 10,000, whatever that means, right? We'll get to a level of perfection beyond any comprehension right now. But it's all going to be based upon what we do right now. Now, the basic way we do this is we learn Torah, and we perform mitzvahs and do good deeds, right? We act morally. We do what God wants us to do. We act like God made us to act in a positive way. We choose the Yetzer Tov, as we say in this week's parsha, right? B'charta b'chai. We choose life. How do we choose life? It says by living by Torah and doing mitzvahs. Story. That's it. The whole thing. That's very simple, very straightforward. Not so easy to do. Easier said than done. But that's the idea. Now, it's not just an issue of loyalty. It's a process. Right? It's like a person, let's say, who's saving up to buy a car. He goes to work every day. He has a job. And his job is to put boxes on a shelf. Every day he has to stock the shelves with boxes, and he gets paid for this. and he's expected to do a certain level of perfection and organization of it, and he does exactly what he's supposed to do to keep his job, to get his paycheck, to put in the bank, right? But the whole point behind all of this is to raise money to come up with the money to buy the car. That's why he's there. That's why he's doing it. He's not doing the job for the sake of the job. He's doing the job for the sake of the money, to buy the house, or to buy the car, to get married, whatever he wants to do. That's the idea. Same thing. We learn Torah, we do mitzvahs. Yeah, there's no question that by doing them alone, that fixes a lot. But the main thing is that it has an impact on creation. How? Because all the sparks have to come out of the realm of evil, the klipas, impurity, whatever you want to call it, right? And when they're finding out that evil disappears, just like smoke, it says, it goes away, and the world becomes perfect, the way we expect it to be, the way we want it to be, utopian. Everything's the way it's supposed. Evil's all gone from the world, and also free will too, because without evil, you can't have free will. So we're now heading towards, and we're now in the Messianic era, moving towards higher levels of this world until finally go to the world to come. All dependent upon these sparks. Creation depends upon these sparks. And how do we get them out? Davening, right? You daven a little bit, you let a few sparks come out. You daven a lot of kavana, more sparks come out. You daven more sparks come out. You learn Torah, sparks come out. All these things have the spiritual power to elevate the sparks out. Now, there are other details to this, and in Shar Hagilgulim, he speaks about, interesting processes to also bring sparks up, but that's the main way. That's the main way. Self-sacrificing for Torah mitzvahs, tefillah is a major way to bring the sparks of the klipas. And every day we daven, and at certain times, there are certain sparks we pull out. The trouble is that because it does depend upon the will of people, it's very possible to fall behind. It's very possible not to do the job properly. For example, someone decides he doesn't like his job anymore, he's going to fall behind. He'll stop putting as many boxes on the shelf as he did before in the past because he's not interested anymore. And he doesn't care about his job, so he's just hanging on. But he gets fired, he doesn't really care that much. So therefore, he doesn't do the job properly. And eventually, the business starts to have problems because inventory is not being kept to date, and things just start to fall apart, and the guy gets fired. And maybe the business goes under in the end. Same thing is true about creation, is that there's a certain schedule, the sparks have to come out, and if everything is going right, if we are living by Torah, as we read about in Parshat Kisava at the beginning, we're doing everything right, all that blessing that's discussed at the beginning of the Parsha is just God's way of saying, this is what the world looks like when you get the sparks out. It just gets better and better and better. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to create a bracha for you. That bracha will come down automatically because of the fact you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. If you don't, that's a problem. Because it's like, if you keep feeding the animals on time, Noah got nipped by the lion because he was a little bit late feeding him. And the lion said, listen, buddy, there's only two of us left over here, a male and a female. And if we go, one of us goes, that's it for the lions altogether. So you have to make sure that you keep us going and keep us alive. It's serious stuff here. And this is the world depends upon certain things. We have to feed the world, we have to feed the spheres. And if we don't do it, they start to starve spiritually. And as they start to starve, then the world starts to look like it does today. And it does in time of the Romans. And what happens at a certain point in time, the situation becomes so burdensome, so spiritually burdensome, that then our tefillahs and our mitzvahs, they lose the koyach to elevate sparks. And now we're really in trouble. Really in trouble. And the world grinds to a halt. I mean, to look at on the surface, all you see is the Romans doing their thing, right? Conquering other nations and enslaving people and corruption everywhere. The world is moving towards self-destruction. How it will happen? How it can be completed even in a non-nuclear age? God can take care of that. He had a flood to wipe out Noah's generation. If he wants, he can start a comet, a solar flare. Just one solar flare breaks loose from 93 million miles away, eating up the electromagnetic sphere, and boom, we're gone. We're done, just like that. It's not hard. It's not hard for God to end all of mankind if he wants to. He doesn't. And that's why he always steps in and interferes to try and make up for things. That's where the 10 martyrs come in. because it turns out that being tzaddikim, they have special koyach. That's what it means to be a tzaddik. A tzaddik is someone who's devoted to the system. They're literally spark rectifiers. They are spark elevators by profession. That's their life. That's how they think about. They're going to do more things as much as possible to elevate more sparks. But it's more than that, the Rizal explains. And he brings an example. There's a pasuk in Koheles that says that, I forget in the actual Hebrew, but it says at a time when a man, overpowered another man to his disadvantage. In other words, he conquered somebody, thinking, well, I conquered this person, but in the end, by conquering him, it was actually a burden for them. And they bring an example, like what happened with the Aron HaKodesh, the Plishtim. The Aron HaKodesh, there were two, actually, one that went to battle, one that stayed back with the Mishkan. But in one of the battles against the earliest Palestinians, or through the Plishtim at those times, the Philistines, right, that they were constantly at war with the Jewish people. And to be matzliach in battle, they took the Aron HaKodesh. And Eli, a Cohen, the Kohen Gadol at that time was completely against it, but they did it anyhow. And his worst nightmare came true. The Plishtim captured it. I cannot tell you what a profanation that is. It was so bad that the shock of it alone caused him to fall backwards and break his neck and die on the spot. And he was a tzaddik, a real tzaddik through and through. And that's what happened to him. That was his fate because of the situation. Now, what happened in the end, as the story goes, and it's actually ironic because I'm sitting here right now in a place called Kiryat Yarim, and if you open the Tanakh, you'll see that Kiryat Yarim was a place of the Aron HaKodesh. After the Plishtim took it, they gave it back on their own, not just but with gifts. Why? Because it turned out to be a bigger burden than a mitzvah, than a plunder. They took it as plunder. It ended up being a burden. People died. People got sick. All kinds of disasters began to happen because they realized the Aron HaKodesh is a special thing. It's a holy thing. God was not happy. So on their own, they gave it back. It sat here somewhere in this area for about 20 years before David HaMelech finally brought it back to the Beis Hamikdash, or back to Yerushalayim at least. So they took it. They had control over it, but it ended up being to their detriment. So the Rizal explains that's also what had to do with the martyrs. When the Romans came in and they caught Rabbi Akiva and they caught Rabbi Chanim Tarajin and all the other tzaddikim that died with them, the list is there right there, Musa, right, each one of them, Rabbi Yishmael and they're there. Sorry, but you just see Romans taking them. But what you don't see behind the surface is klipos taking Jewish neshamas. The bodies are just the vehicles for us to play out in the physical world. But the actual spiritual reality is this is the klipos in the guise of the Romans taking the Jewish sparks, which are the souls of the tzaddikim, and capturing them. And the Rizal says that because they have such koiches, they're so devoted to Hashem, that when they were physically tortured, the suffering they went through had the ability to take sparks out of the klipos that could not get out on their own, on the level of the malchus, which is the lowest level. When their souls were taken from them, they actually died in the process of what they underwent. So then that had the power to pull out sparks even on a higher level, on the level of Bina. So it turns out that by taking these 10 martyrs, the reason why they saved creation is not just because they died al Kiddush Hashem and their souls went up to Shemayim, but by dying al Kiddush Hashem, by going through the suffering that they went through and they embraced, they actually were able to make up for some lost time and elevate sparks that were necessary to come out at that stage of history to keep creation going. So the Rizal explains, he says this is the language he used, and you don't find this language used very often, not in the story. He says the klipos kidnap the souls. That's what they do. The klipos they kidnap the souls. Chatufim. That's the language. He's talking about sparks. Talking about souls and leaving the klipos, but the klipos come in. and they capture these souls and they kidnap them. Now, that sounds horrific, and obviously it is. We saw the results of this. The part that we don't see is what's going on because of it. I mean, just even on the surface of it. I mean, nobody makes these cheshbonos but Akash Baruch Hu. We can't make these cheshbonos. Very hard. We can't. We simply can't. But Akash Baruch Hu does. Right? And the war is ongoing. Right now, we're getting pressure once again from the Americans, to try and stop, ceasefire and from all around the world. You know why? Because Hamas and Hezbollah, they're all crying to everybody else, to their counterparts, or then crying to the Americans and put pressure on Israel, right, to stop the war. Why? They never saw this coming. They didn't realize it was going to go on so long. They didn't anticipate that this war would take the kind of toll it did on them in the end. Yeah, I mean, we've lost people. We've lost a lot of people, and a lot of people have suffered, and they will continue to suffer, and families as well. But the numbers, the toll that it's taken on decades of work that they did in destroying it, it's gone far beyond. You have to wonder if they're now wondering whether it was a right thing to do, not the right thing, obviously, but a good thing even from their perspective. Was it a good thing, or is it now working out to their disadvantage? Because the world has not come through for them as much as they had hoped. Israel did not fall apart as much as they hoped. The left, as much as it tried to undermine the government, hasn't done it as of yet, and hopefully won't be able to, right? And it's going on. I mean, the jets keep flying overhead. More so the last few days, the last week or so, that I heard, weeks before that. Things are going on, and just keep going. And what happened in Lebanon with the beepers and everything is like. So in the end, for sure, it will be to their disadvantage. But this idea is extremely significant. The truth is, we brought it up before. And it's a frightening thing to say, and I wouldn't say it if it wasn't right here in this forum itself. And then I understand why we're saying it. I mean, Rosh Hashanah is coming up. You know what the din of Rosh Hashanah is going to? You know what they're going to ask on Rosh Hashanah? Not were you on the naughty list this year? That's not us. They're going to ask you, basically, how many sparks did you elevate? They're going to tell you. They have the cheshbon right down to the last one. We have no idea how many sparks did we elevate. Giving a shiur right now, sparks are hopefully going up and not down. How many? Who knows? Watching the shiur, talking to somebody else, davening Shemona Esrei, all these things. They're all how many? We have no idea. How many sparks are there? We have no idea. How many sparks can you take out by this amount of effort? This amount of effort. We have no idea. But they do in Shemayim, and every year, right, as the lesson points out, they ask the question, is this person a ben olam haba? And the lesson says, how can you ask that question? A ben olam haba means somebody who's destined to go to the world to come. But we know that you cannot decide if someone's going to the world to come until the very last moment of life, when they can't do any more good or bad. Then you know where they're standing. Because people, in the course of their lifetime, have begun as tzaddikim and gone the other direction. And other people who began just the opposite became tzaddikim. So until a person dies, you can't ask that, but they do. They ask that question every year. So the question basically is that if this person were to die today, would they be a ben olam haba? What does that depend upon? Well, what is olam haba? Well, it's the world to come. Does anyone know it exactly? No, we have no dislike. But we do know one thing, that you build your own portion. You build your own portion. You build your chelik. You're the one who gives yourself your chelik in the world to come. God just creates the opportunity to do that. He facilitates that it should happen. But you're the one, because the world to come is built from the sparks that you elevated throughout the course of all your lifetimes, because it's the same soul all through all the Gilgulim. The body changes, but it's one soul with different parts, but one soul. So therefore, all the sparks you were able to elevate out of the klipos in the course of your lifetimes, they become the bricks that build a portion that you're going to live in forever in the world to come. So when they ask the question, is this person a ben olam haba on Rosh Hashanah when the 3 stars come out? they're basically asking, has this person elevated enough sparks to call it a place in the world to come? And the more we're able to do that, the more we're able to be a part of the Kodesh Baruch Hu in the completion of Ma'aseh Bereshis. And the completion of Ma'aseh Bereshis has historic events. Ma'aseh Bereshis was one of the first ones. It goes by before Ma'aseh Bereshis, but Ma'aseh Bereshis is where the Torah begins. And then it goes through history, and we have Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and we have a first Beis Hamikdash, a second Beis Hamikdash, but before that, we had Kabbalah Sator, we had Yitzis Mitzrayim, right? We have all kinds of events in history. Purim, Hanukkah. Lately, everything's so much more mundane because we don't have prophecy, we're not on the same level anymore. But there's no question, tremendous Hashgacha Pratis is still guiding us the entire time through. And those events are based upon sparks being elevated. A Beis Hamikdash can only exist the way it does, when it does, because of the amount of sparks that were elevated until that time to allow it to be built. The reason why the second Beis Hamikdash was not as holy as the first Beis Hamikdash, well, you'll say because there were 5 things that were missing. And besides, the divine presence wasn't as prevalent, and mankind was going downhill, and there was no prophecy anymore, so therefore it was a much more mundane world. It was more down, more like the Gentile part, No, but the reason why that is, it doesn't have to be that way. In Gan Eden, it was consistently good every single day. There wasn't Yeridus Adoris in Gan Eden. That happened post Gan Eden. Like you didn't age. You didn't have to die. Decay is the result of what happened after we left the Garden of Eden. So then why did we go down? Why is Tel Aviv a much less holy city today than Jerusalem? Why do people live there as if they're living in Europe as opposed to here? Which one looks more like Eretz Canaan and which one looks more like Eretz Israel? Well, clearly, wherever you go to, it may not be the cleanest places, but the Torah and the mitzvahs, the Mesiras Nefesh, and the Yiddishkeit, it's like clearly everybody else might be nice people and they have clean streets and very organized sidewalks and et cetera, but the spiritual content, that's what interests God. Don't get me wrong, it's great to have both. If you can have both, why not? Because God ordered creation, so why should we live orderly lives too? But one or the other, it's the spiritual content. It's the Torah, it's the mitzvahs. And even on the surface, it looks like, someone just told me today that they were one of the from news stations was talking about certain chalitzas that had to be done when a woman she loses her husband without having any children. Technically speaking, she's supposed to do yibum with the brother-in-law, but we don't do that anymore, not for a long time. But we still have to do chalitza, which means the thing with the shoe. You can look it up online. The Torah itself, and someone commented on the article. The article is like saying, "Look, it's amazing. We're doing this stuff even today, and here how it's done." And there are definitely some very tough stories to do with this, but still, it's an amazing thing. It's a biblical thing taking place even today. And some writers saying, "Boy, you guys are weird, and you have weird customs. This doesn't make sense to me, and how you can still be doing this in this day and age, right?" And out of touch with reality. That's what they think we are. But the person themselves, they're disconnected. Yesterday, I heard about someone, I guess a religious person, who's had a tough time and referred to God as a terrorist because of all the bad, negative things that they've seen God do, so to speak. And how do we get to a point like that? How does the world get to a point like today, like the time of the Romans? How do people become so distant from the dust, from having clarity? How does it happen? So the answer is that all the sparks still stuck in the klipos, because as long as the sparks are in the grip of the enemy, now that's the spiritual enemy, but it was no different in physical terms. In World War II, that was the Nazis. The Nazis were the hand of the klipos at that time, capturing, literally kidnapping Jewish souls, unaware that by taking them and then making them suffer, right, their bodies, and then killing them and causing those sparks to leave Europe and go to Shemayim, that we got back Eretz Yisrael in 1948. There's no other explanation. They're completely connected for obvious reasons, and not so obvious reasons. And if the enemy were to know, if the Klippos were to know, is that if someone would say to the Klippos, hey, before you take those 10 martyrs, you should know they're going to die, yes, but they're going to take out of you sparks like there's no tomorrow. And it won't be for you, because they'll take they're going to weaken you in the end. Would they have taken the 10 martyrs? No. If you told Hitler and the Nazi regime, that by doing this to the Jewish people, that you're going to facilitate their final redemption, yeah, you'll do a lot of harm in the meantime. You'll cause them to suffer 100%. But by doing this, ultimately speaking, you're going to expedite redemption. Would they have done it? Probably not. It's not in their best interest anymore. This is what the Arizal is explaining. And aside from being able to at least have a deeper, more profound understanding of the events that happened pretty much a year ago at this time, and what it means in the long term for the Jewish people. These people died. Now, someone will say, yeah, but they weren't Tzaddikim. So first of all, I'm not supposed to really tell you this, but the Ramak says that anybody who lives in Eretz Yisrael has a shame tzaddik to them, just by virtue of living in Eretz Yisrael. The Moshe Kedavero, and he's an authority. As he says. And he brings a pasuk to show why, but this deeper understanding explanation as well. And the next thing, and you think, the first time I saw this, I thought to myself, but what if the person's a Russia? And the next thing he says, even if they look like a Russia, they still have a shame tzaddik to them. He says the only time it's not going to be true is that if the person knowing this says, well, if I'm a tzaddik anyhow, no matter what I do, so let me go have a party and do what I want, then that's not going to work. You can't rely upon it. But at least someone who doesn't know about it is not living by it. They're either tinning v'nishba, or they're confused and they're lost, and but they're living in Eretz Yisrael. That can have an aspect of tzidkis. And the suffering is the suffering, whether you're a tzaddik or not a tzaddik, and the death also. And that has the power to be able to elevate not just their sparks out of the klippos, but even sparks that are in the klippos that can't get out on their own because our tefillah and our mitzvahs are too weak to take them out. Advancing the cause of Geula. But we need to learn from this, though, something. We understand something. It's all, interesting and profound to be able to try to rationalize what happened and spin it in a different light that's more positive. And it's not really more positive. I mean, I guess by it being more meaningful and seeing like more, a godly thing is a more positive thing. But the pain is the pain, the suffering is the suffering, the families are mourning. That's just the reality, the situation. But the lesson that we have to get out of this, especially as we go into this Rosh Hashanah, we have no idea. Last Rosh Hashanah, we had no idea what was coming up in 2 weeks' time. Even the morning, we went to shul and Simchas Torah that day. We had no idea. Normally, there's a sense of advance warning and cautions, but literally oblivious. Until Mincha that afternoon, I did not know really what was going on. Other than the fact I saw, I heard sirens and I saw missiles being blown up in the sky. I could tell something was going up, but not much until later on. So here's Rosh Hashanah coming along, and we have no idea. I mean, the Geula is so close. I mean, the Geula is so close you can taste it, feel it, like it's palpable. And here's Rosh Hashanah. It's a big turning point of the year, a big time for divine decisions, and ours too. You can't approach it the same way. You can't just go into that. It's another Yom Adin, judgment, all that. No, we have no idea what's coming up. But we know one thing for sure: it depends upon sparks being taken out of the klippos. And the more that we do that on our own, through our own free will chosen Mesiras Nefesh, the less Hashem has to create situations that draw it out of us. That's the most important lesson of all. That's something that we can take with us the rest of our life, but certainly coming to this Rosh Hashanah, we got to take it seriously. We got to really, think about it. Sit down, take some time. Don't just show up, but take some time to think about what we just spoke about, and everything else is involved. And God willing, that if we do that, somehow that it will be enough. Because above to him, my sinus, so Shem just wants to see us take steps in the proper direction, and then he helps us in a big way, big time, and great things get accomplished even with little amount of our effort involved. But if we just sit back and we just take life like it's another year, we've been waiting for thousands of years, so wait another 1,000 years if we have to. No, that's not the approach, because that, God forbid, leads to what we went through last year. But we take advantage of the situation, we elevate those sparks, we put the Mesiras Nefesh into our tefillah and our mitzvahs, extra sincerity. Not only do you build a better and bigger house for yourself in the world to come, but you become a big contributor to the completion of the master plan for creation on your own terms, not history's terms. Okay? Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Winston. At the whole idea of collecting the sparks of Kedusha have always fascinated me, and we've heard it from you for many years, of the details, and from other people as well. And I was always under the impression that I didn't know that we had to complete all collection of the sparks of Kedusha before the Geula would come. I didn't know. I knew they were connected, but not that closely. Does that make sense?
Even before that, just for Mashiach to come. The actual answer to the question is, when will Mashiach come? The answer is, the Rizal says, when the last spark is out of the klipos. What date is that? Well, that depends on us. That's the variable. When that last spark is out, Mashiach comes. There's no delay. There's no extra things to do. That's it. That's what history is waiting for. Just to bring Mashiach. From that point onward, it's already a different world.
And everybody can do it. I mean, every Jew, even if people aren't observant, you're saying people who make a step in the right direction are contributing. Because it seems impossible to think that everybody would be, totally on board religious. I mean, that'll happen eventually for sure. But I mean, that seems like it's almost more possible than the ending of this war.
Well, listen, we don't. As I said, we don't know the cheshbonos. Right. Hashem is completely fair. He's not going to make an impossible task, and expect us to do it. He's giving us the opportunity. But a person, if they're aware of what it is and what they can do, and they contribute to that, they're obviously going to have a bigger impact than someone who's not. But the moment that somebody does it, a secular Jew does a good deed for somebody else because they know it's a good thing to do, it's a moral thing to do, that will take a spark. It'll move a spark around.
I mean, I'm thinking, for example, of these people who are on the kibbutzim, who went back into the kibbutz and back and forth, saving people's lives. None of them were observant. They actually, most of them were left-wing, pro-Palestinian at the time. I suppose, maybe hope they're not anymore. But I mean, they've saved multiple lives, these people, and risked their lives every single time. And that's the biggest Kiddush Hashem I can think of.
God has to work those parts out, because people are the way they are. They think what they think because of so much confusion and misinformation, misunderstanding. And the same way that he can decide who's responsible for what, he also has to take into account, people's backgrounds and everything. But doing the good deed, helping the people out, because that's what needs to be done. That's becomes a mitzvah. So that's the starting point.
Okay, thank you so much, Rabbi. You should have a blessed, sweet, and happy and safe New Year. You and your family should be blessed.
Yeah,
Hashem should bless you with much more Torah knowledge to give to us, because we really need it, especially now this time in history. And Shana Tova to everybody out there listening. Please check Rabbi's website, and please pass this on to other people and watch the replays. Send them to your friends, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next year, everyone. Shana Tova. We should all be safe. The war should end. The hostages should be released, and the soldiers should be safe. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi.